Well, it's been a heck of a week in Washington, D.C. Some critics are arguing that Congress and the Obama administration are adrift amid a sea of corruption. Well, I think the guys sitting next to me also agree with that. Our political insiders are here. John LeBoutillier, former Republican congressman for New York. Pat Caddell, a Fox News contributor and a former pollster for President Jimmy Carter. And hanging with the beautiful people in Miami, Doug Schoen, also a Fox News contributor and former pollster for Bill Clinton. Say hello to Beyonce and Jay-Z. Hey, let's start with you, okay? Now, you do agree that the administration is adrift and corrupt. In what way? What events?
Well, I think there are 5 real examples. I mean, if you look at what's happened in Syria now, we had a red line. The use of chemical weapons, Gregg, was going to be a, quote, game changer. We've crossed the red line. It is a game changer, and nothing's happening. Benghazi remains a mess. The FAA issue, for goodness sake, look at the chaos last week, and suddenly it's been solved. Why did that have to happen? We have an FBI that is still trying to make sense of what happened in Boston 2 weeks ago. And we have Obamacare, which is clearly going to be implemented with huge problems. Congress has opted out, and Max Baucus, the Democrat who helped facilitate it, calls it a train wreck.
You got some
guys.
This
is an administration out of control.
You got guys sitting next to me who are kind of nodding over here. Pat, what say you?
Well, let me just say red lines. Let's not forget Iran, the one where our policy where we basically, you think problems in Syria, right. You try Iran. But look at the FBI situation. We find out 16 hours in the questioning, it's cut off. Eric Holder, the Attorney General, this is a replay of the underwear bomber. Right. It is a replay of this entire administration's policy.
The guy lawyered up. As soon as the judge walked in and Holder.
And the judge and the Holder said, oh, the judge came out of nowhere. No, this is a policy administration which is to not mention Islamic extremism. We saw a story this week where the CIA director, Brennan, was involved in editing the books, making sure we don't talk about it. But this stuff goes everywhere.
John, what about your party?
I mean,
they're not doing anything. Are they taking advantage of this, the GOP?
No, they're non-existent, the GOP. And the few times they surface...
They're not going to like you saying that, John.
Well, that's too bad, because the 3 of us as a group have said to you, Gregg, for a year that, here you get the issue of Benghazi. And 101 members of the Republican House have asked Boehner in a letter to create a special select committee to investigate the whole thing, find out what happened. He refuses to have the committee. That's crazy. This is an issue that cries out for the truth. Right. And politically, it would be smart because they need to get on the offense for once, not always on the defense.
Yeah. Doug, let me go back to you because you did bring up the idea of, the FBI's handling of the Homeland Security and the events surrounding the Boston Marathon bombing. Here is here's a soundbite from the current president talking about his predecessor at the library installation. Let's take a listen.
As we walk through this library, obviously we're reminded of the incredible strength and resolve that came through that bullhorn as he stood amid the rubble and the ruins of Ground Zero, promising to deliver justice to those who had sought to destroy our way of life.
Now, Doug, that was very gracious. Is there a part of the current president that kind of wishes he had a piece of the last president?
Well, let's put it this way. That was the kind of rhetoric I think we all would agree that American presidents should use. Bottom line, the president gave credit where credit was due. But bottom line also, Gregg, is this is a man who said, oh, I inherited this mess. And every policy and every bit of rhetoric that Obama has used as president has been devoted to blaming George Bush for the problems of the country rather than trying to pull the country together. So this was too little, too late, but gracious nonetheless.
Pat, I want to ask you about Senator Max Baucus, because you just took a swipe at Obamacare. He was a key architect of Obamacare.
One of the 2 or 3.
And now he's come out and he said this is a train wreck.
As he retires.
As he leaves to become a lobbyist with the other 28 lobbyists, former staff people or lobbyists. This is the man who did it and said it was a train wreck. The Republicans in the House have done nothing about reforming this. And guess what happened this week? week, the ultimate corruption. We find out that the leadership in both houses are trying to get themselves and their staffs exempted the way the executive branch. Remember the president, it's the greatest thing ever. Now he says, oh, I don't know whether I'm going to be on it or not. Everybody's getting stuck. This same corruption with the FAA. They go to the Congress and say, we'll protect D.C. We'll make sure you can fly.
Here's what we found out, John, about Obamacare. And much of this, by the way, an admission from Kathleen Sebelius, who's, you know, the health secretary. People are losing their health plans. And, in fact, companies are dropping theirs. It's driving up premiums. Costs are going up. New taxes are levied to pay for it. Doctor shortages by tens of thousands. The exchanges are a complete mess, and now they're delayed, and who knows if they'll ever happen. And 20 million are still uninsured.
And what does the Republican House do? Do they, in concert, try to end Obamacare as they would have the power to do? No.
Or postpone it or delay it?
Or defund it or anything. Instead, they contemplated a bill to help shore it up. And only the conservatives had to step in and tell Boehner, no go, we're not going to go along with it.
Hey, Doug, economic growth, 2.5%. The numbers just came out 2 days ago. That's less than what economists predicted. And now they're saying, hey, and guess what? In the second quarter that we're already about to be in or in, it's going to be an abysmal 1%. All of this on the president's watch.
Well, it's all on the president's watch. We haven't really discussed it all today. The top issue facing most Americans, which are jobs, the economy, and the cost of living. And bottom line, the American people want and expect the Congress, and particularly the president, to do something. And given the sequester and the dysfunction you spoke of earlier, Greg, we're going to have minimal to non-existent economic growth, limited job creation. America is going to continue to be in real trouble.
I think this is the period of time, the spring of 2013, that we will someday look back and see the second term of Obama begin to go down into failure.
He's already at 47%.
Yes, but not just him. It is the entire establishment of Washington, which last night had their big party of the orgy of self-adulation that they have with celebrities, in which, you know, they had Kevin Spacey, who was in the show, you know, the House of Cards, playing this corrupt guy from my home state, South Carolina. And he's got all these people, Valerie Jarrett and everyone on there. And he, you know what he says in it? He said, I lie, I cheat, I intimidate, but, you know, it works. And it was basically, they were all applauding that. You know what they did? It was basically thumbing their nose to the American people. It's not just going to be Obama. It is going to be a political class that is self-dealing. Look at
Pat, that was the White House press, or White House correspondents.
Yes, the people that don't cover the news.
The media is the one that, so far, always cuts Obama slack. He never gets criticized for any of this stuff.
And he was attacking them anyway. He was still at the end. He was unhappy with them.
Is the Washington press a bunch of sycophants for the president?
Totally. They're in the they've been in the tank all along.
Doug, last word.
Greg, they don't tell the truth about the dysfunction in Washington and about the dissatisfaction that the American people feel, and I think it's a darn shame.
This week, we saw the dedication of George W. Bush's presidential library in Texas, and now former President Bush is speaking out about the future of the Republican Party with our own Brett Baer. Take a listen.
We're leaderless now. The Republican Party's leaderless. It's not the first time we've been leaderless, nor will it be the last time a political party is leaderless. In other words, we've been in the wilderness.
You're kind of shifting in your chair if you're Mitch McConnell and John Boehner. With us are political insiders John LeBoutillier, Pat Caddell. Doug Schoen is in Miami. All right, Pat, let me start with you. Is the former president right?
Yeah, well, just look at we're going to have the first election since November, special election in where I live in Charleston, South Carolina, a district that went for Romney at 58%, where Obama has a 41% approval rating, and the Democrat, Colbert Bush, is leading the former governor Sanford now by 9 points. And I will tell you, having been on the ground there, the energy, the Bush campaign is unbelievable. Bill Ramsey, a friend of mine, is running it. But I want to tell you something. There are 4 Democratic groups. They're spending money. They've got ads up. The Republicans are absolutely paralyzed, and they're going to lose this district.
John, is there something with the Republican Party that they always seem to select guys to run for office who have issues with women?
Yeah, well, it seems that way, doesn't it? With Todd Aiken and Murdoch in Indiana, now this guy. But this thing tells me a lot about what's wrong mechanically with the Republican Party. Now, we have this thing called the National Republican Campaign Committee, run by Republican congressmen. They have a lot of money. They should have been in this race early, before the Republicans had picked a candidate.
Right.
They should have been in there attacking her on her issues and positions, big labor and all. And if they saw that Sanford was going to win the primary, they should have worked it a little bit to keep him from winning. A smart party wants to do one thing: win elections.
Well, particularly this one.
All right. Doug, before I come to you, I want to play the Democratic Congressional Committee ad. Take a listen to this, and then I'll get back to you.
Republicans called it misconduct and abuse of power, and Sanford paid the largest ethics fine in state history. Now he wants our trust again? Maybe Mark Sanford should just keep walking.
Man, Doug, you could see that one coming a mile away.
Appalachian Trail.
The Appalachian Trail.
Yes, you could. And John and Pat raise a very, very good issue. Political parties have to manage. Look, Sanford is a flawed and indeed deeply flawed candidate, but there was no leadership. There's been no leadership from the National Republican Party, from the Congressional Campaign Committee, to try to structure the campaign. And the fact that Sanford created what are arguably violations of his divorce agreement in terms of the custody part during the campaign speaks volumes about how this is just a totally out of control process and campaign.
But the problem is going to be is what it's going to trigger. He was already in trouble before the revelation about going in the trespassing in his wife's house. Look, what's going to happen on May 8th is the Democratic Party is going to say, my God, if we can win Charleston, we can win anywhere. It's going to look like the Whigs. They are energized. They're trying to take Texas. This is a big deal. The Republican Party keeps losing and it keeps retreating. You have to win somewhere, and you better win your own race.
If Republicans are smart, they should have tried to persuade Sanford's ex-wife to run.
Yes.
Well, there was talk about it.
I know.
And they should have defined the race as a referendum against before Bush before arrived.
The one thing that Pat has raised just now is that this thing's on May 7th. If they win the race, the next day they're going to announce, the Democrats are going to announce this attempt to turn Texas into a blue state.
So it's a game changer, domino effect?
Well, they're going to try to make it that way. But where are the Republicans trying to turn a blue state red? I never hear about this.
There's a bunch of Democratic senators retiring. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I have an answer to that one. You've got Chris Christie in New Jersey, who is the only Republican who's proven he can make a real breakthrough in the bluest of blue states. He's within 2 or 3 points in the presidential trial heats of Hillary Clinton. And what do the Republicans do? They effectively run him out of the party and disinvite him to CPAC.
All right, gentlemen, we got to call it quits. Our political insiders, many thanks to Doug Schoen out in Miami, Pat Caddell, and Representative John LeBoutillier. We'll see you back here next weekend.
Thanks, Greg.
And you can catch more from Political Insiders every Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern at live.foxnews.com. They'll be back here on Sunday next week. You can also follow them on Twitter at FN Insiders.